They thought she was just a kid, curled up in seat 11D with an oversized hoodie pulled over her head, earbuds in, breathing slow like the whole world was safe. People even smiled when they passed her, because who would ever fear a child sleeping on a plane? Then the cockpit alarms screamed. Not turbulence, not a warning light, not a small mechanical issue. Missile lock. Up front, the captain's hands went stiff on the controls as three fast-moving dots closed in on the radar like sharks in open water. The co-pilot whispered, "Those aren't planes," and her voice cracked, "They're combat drones." And before anyone in the cabin could even understand what that meant, the captain grabbed the intercom and his words hit the whole aircraft like a punch. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a drill, we are under attack, we have less than 90 seconds, is there anyone on board with combat pilot experience? I need you in the cockpit right now." That's when the comm cabin turned into a storm. Passengers screamed, people started praying, someone shouted goodbye into a phone, and a little boy started crying so hard he couldn't breathe. Because in that moment, everyone understood the same terrifying truth. A plane can't hide, and a missile doesn't care who you are. In row 11, the businessman in 11C fumbled his phone with shaking fingers, whispering, "Please pick up, please pick up." The elderly woman across the aisle clutched a pendant and mouthed words like she was trying to bargain with heaven. And still, seat 11D didn't move. Until the captain's voice came again, more desperate now, almost begging. "Is there anyone at all, who knows how to fly in combat?" That's when the kid in 11D finally opened her eyes. Not sleepy, not confused, not scared. Focused. Like someone who had heard that sound before. Like someone who knew exactly what came next. And the moment she stood up, small as she was, the air around her felt different. Because this wasn't a child waking up. This was a pilot clocking in. If you're watching this right now, comment where you're watching from, because what happened next on this flight is going to shock you. The cabin lights were turned low, that soft blue glow that makes a long flight feel like a floating hotel, and the plane cut through the sky so smoothly you could forget you were sitting inside a metal tube at 37,000 feet. It was one of those, nothing happens, flights, the kind where time melts away between snack carts, movie screens, and quiet yawns. Some passengers had their trays down with half-eaten pretzels, some stared at seat-back TVs with blank faces, and some were already curled into blankets like they'd moved into the clouds for the night. Near the middle of the plane, row 11 was doing what row 11 always did, surviving the journey in its own little bubble of ordinary life. In 11C sat a tired man in a sharp suit, the kind of guy who typed like the world would end if he missed a deadline, his laptop open, his jaw tight, eyes flicking between numbers like they were more important than sleep. In 11E sat an older woman with gentle hands and a careful smile, the type who notices small things, like a dropped scarf, a trembling voice, or a child who looks too small to be traveling alone. And between them, in seat 11D, was the reason nobody in that row thought twice about anything. A little girl. She was tucked into an oversized hoodie that swallowed her whole, sleeves covering her hands, hood tilted forward like a curtain, earbuds still in her ears even though nothing was playing. Her head leaned into a travel pillow, her breathing slow and deep, the kind of sleep only kids get when their bodies finally give up. When she boarded earlier, a flight attendant had checked her ticket twice because the unaccompanied minor note always made staff extra careful. The girl had answered politely, almost too politely, with that strange maturity some kids have when they've learned not to ask for help. So the crew kept an eye on her from a distance, not because they suspected danger, but because they worried someone might bother her. During drink service they didn't even wake her, they just rolled the cart past and whispered, "Poor thing must be exhausted." The man in 11C barely looked at her, just shifted his knees so she could stay asleep, already deciding she was just another kid flying to visit family. The older woman in 11E kept glancing at her like a grandmother does, soft eyes, protective instincts, and at one point when the blanket slid, she gently pulled it back up to cover the girl's shoulder. No one saw a hero. No one saw a soldier. No one saw a trained mind hiding behind a hoodie. They saw what they expected to see. A harmless sleeping child. And that was exactly why what happened next hit so hard, because the night felt normal right up until it wasn't. Because the truth was, the girl in 11D was only ordinary on purpose. Her real story wasn't on any passenger list, it wasn't in any public record, and it definitely wasn't something a random traveler could guess by looking at a hoodie and a messy bun. Her name on that ticket was Maya Torres, a quiet 12-year-old from a gifted student program. But the name the people in the shadows used for her was something else. Call sign, Falcon. And Falcon didn't exist on paper. Years ago, a program was built in total silence, a program so hidden that even most high-ranking officers didn't know it was real. They called it Project Skyforge. No official funding line, no public base, no proud speeches, just locked doors, erased files, and people who learned to keep their mouths shut forever. Skyforge didn't look for the strongest kids, or the bravest kids, or the kids with famous parents. It looked for something rarer. Kids whose brains worked like radar. Kids who could track moving objects without blinking, who could picture a spinning 3D shape in their mind like it was right in front of them, who reacted so fast the testing machines would flash error like the system didn't believe what it was seeing. They found those kids through everything, school tests, sports footage, even video game performance and reaction time patterns, because talent like that leaves fingerprints everywhere. Maya got flagged when she was 7, during a standard school assessment. The software marked her score as impossible. So they retested her, then tested her again, then brought in a specialist who was sure it had to be a glitch. It wasn't. Maya could mentally rotate complex objects perfectly, she could predict motion like she was calculating the future, and her reaction time was so fast it made grown adults uncomfortable, like watching a child catch lightning. 3 months later, a man in a plain jacket knocked on her family's apartment door in El Paso. He didn't pretend it was something cute or fun, he didn't sell it like a dream. He told her parents the ugly truth right away. There's a program, he said, it's dangerous, it's classified, it will take her childhood, and it will ask her to carry things no kid should ever carry. Her father was a former Marine, the kind of man who understood duty even when it hurt. Her mother was a hospital nurse, the kind of woman who had seen enough loss to know that sometimes saving lives costs something. They listened, they argued late into the night, they cried when they thought Maya couldn't hear them. And then they did the one thing the recruiter didn't expect. They asked Maya what she wanted. She was 7, small for her age, eyes too serious for a child. And she only asked one question. Do I get to fly? The recruiter nodded, yes, and you'll fly better than almost anyone alive. Maya looked between her parents and said, if I can save people, I want to do it. That was the moment her life split into 2 worlds. One world was homework, cartoons, birthdays, and pretending to be normal. The other world was locked hangars, silent instructors, and training that would break most adults. They didn't throw her into a jet at 7. They started with simulators, motion rigs, reflex drills, breathing control, the kind of mental training that taught her how to stay calm when the body wants to panic. At 8, she learned systems like other kids learn spelling. At 9, she sat in real cockpits with an instructor right behind her, hands ready to take over, while she learned the sky the way some kids learn a playground. At 10, the simulators became brutal, smoke smell pumped into the room, violent shaking, alarms screaming, instructors shouting at her while she had to keep her hands steady. They weren't trying to scare her. They were trying to teach her that fear is a loud liar, and the only way to beat it is to keep moving anyway. By 11, she was flying training missions that would make experienced pilots sweat. By 12, they gave her the first mission they could never admit existed. A special operations team was trapped in hostile territory, the kind of place where the official answer was, we are not operating there. Civilians were nearby, the margin for error wasn't a mile, it was a few meters. They needed a pilot who could fly low, fast, and clean, and still hit exactly what needed to be hit. So they sent Maya. She flew a ground attack aircraft built to take punishment and keep going, the kind of ugly workhorse that saves lives by doing violent math in the sky. She came in under enemy fire, calm as ice, and made every strike with surgical precision. The team lived, civilians lived, and the people shooting at them didn't. When it was over, the report was short and cold. Mission success, no friendly losses, no civilian losses, pilot showed zero panic and perfect judgment. That's when they gave her the call sign Falcon, for the way she could see everything at once and strike without missing. In the months that followed, she didn't just train, she worked. Real missions, real danger, real consequences. By the time she ended up on that civilian flight, she had flown 22 combat operations. She had logged hundreds of hours in hostile airspace, more time under pressure than some pilots ever see in an entire career. And the strangest part was how she carried it. Skyforge psychologists watched her constantly, waiting for cracks, waiting for trauma to swallow her. But Maya processed combat in a way that made even the experts uneasy. She understood violence with a calm logic, she grieved when she had to, but she didn't spiral. One evaluation said she was 2 people at once. A kid who still loved sweet cereal and silly movies. And a pilot who could stare at death and not blink. Officially, Maya was just a bright student in a special aviation education track. Her online life was carefully normal, homework complaints, goofy selfies, harmless posts, nothing that made anyone suspicious. Because the whole strategy depended on one simple truth. Nobody suspects a child. Nobody looks twice at a small girl in an oversized hoodie. And right before Flight 633, Maya had been coming off a punishing 72-hour operation, briefings stacked on briefings, simulator updates, one real sortie that left her body running on fumes. Protocol said she needed a mandatory rest period with her cover family. So they put her on a regular commercial flight, tucked her into seat 11D like she was just another kid traveling alone. And she fell asleep before the plane even finished boarding. A tiny figure, peaceful and harmless. While the truth sat hidden under that hoodie like a loaded secret, waiting for the moment the world would finally demand it. The first sign that something was wrong wasn't a scream or a bang, it was a tiny vibration, the kind you feel in your bones before you understand it with your mind. Most passengers didn't notice, because the plane still felt smooth, still felt normal, still felt like a long boring ride through the sky. But up in the cockpit, Captain Ethan Cole frowned at his instruments like a man who just heard a door creak in an empty house. He was the type of captain people trusted without knowing his name, calm voice, steady hands, tens of thousands of hours in the air, and a reputation for never panicking. His first officer, Lena Park, leaned in closer when she saw his expression change, because pilots don't stare like that unless something is truly off. On the radar screen, 3 small blips appeared where nothing should be, moving too fast, too clean, too purposeful. Captain Cole tapped the display, changed modes, checked again, then sat up straighter as the contacts stayed locked in place like they wanted to be seen. "What is that?" he muttered, not to Lena, but to himself, like his brain was refusing to label it. Lena narrowed her eyes, then swallowed hard. "Those signatures are wrong," she said, "too small for planes, too fast for anything civilian." Outside the windows was only black sky and the endless desert below, miles of emptiness, nowhere near a busy air corridor where weird traffic made sense. Then the radio crackled with air traffic control, calm at first, but too calm, like someone trying to keep their voice steady. "Pacific Air 417, we're showing unidentified contacts converging on your position, can you confirm visual or radar?" Captain Cole clicked his mic, "Center, Pacific Air 417, we confirm 3 fast contacts, closing quickly, request identification." There was a pause. Not the normal short pause, but a heavy one, the kind that makes your stomach drop before the words even arrive. When the controller came back, his voice sounded different, tighter, older, like fear had just stepped into the room. "Pacific Air 417, be advised, those contacts are being assessed as unmanned combat drones, military grade, we are scrambling interceptors, ETA 15 minutes, you need to take evasive action immediately." Lena went pale so fast it looked like all the color drained straight out of her skin. Combat drones, she whispered, like saying it out loud might make it real. Captain Cole's hand hovered over the controls, because he knew how to handle storms, medical emergencies, engine issues, all the things commercial pilots train for. But nobody trains a passenger jet captain to fight weapons in the sky. And that's when the warning system screamed, sharp and violent, like the aircraft itself was yelling. A red message flashed across the panel, and it didn't care how experienced he was, it didn't care how steady his hands were. Missile lock. Lena stared at the display, her lips trembling. That can't be happening, she said, not to us. But the alarm didn't lie, and the pitch of it got more urgent, like time was running out. Captain Cole checked the range and felt his chest tighten, because the drones weren't just nearby, they were closing fast, deliberately, like hunters lining up a shot. He tried the radio again. Center, Pacific Air 417, confirm, are those drones targeting us? The controller answered with words no passenger ever expects to exist on a normal flight. Pacific Air 417, we believe you are being actively targeted, interceptors are inbound but you have minutes, you must maneuver now. Captain Cole looked at Lena, and for the first time his voice wasn't steady, it was quiet and raw. We're a commercial flight, he said, we don't have flares, we don't have countermeasures, we don't have combat training. Lena's eyes flicked to the timer flashing on the system, and her voice came out like a crack. If they fire, we won't outrun it. And right then, another warning flashed, even worse than the first. Launch window imminent. Captain Cole's throat tightened as he realized what imminent meant. It meant seconds, not minutes. 200+ people behind that cockpit door, eating snacks, watching movies, sleeping, living normal little moments. And none of them knew the sky had just turned into a battlefield. Captain Cole reached for the PA mic with a hand that didn't feel like his own anymore. Because he had no other move left. And what he was about to say would turn the whole cabin upside down. Captain Cole pressed the intercom button, and for half a second he just breathed, like his lungs were trying to convince him this couldn't be real. Then his voice came through the cabin speakers, and it didn't sound like the calm, friendly captain voice people were used to. It sounded like a man trying not to fall apart. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Cole, he said, and the pause after his name felt heavy. We are experiencing an emergency situation. Some passengers looked up from their screens, annoyed at first, assuming it was turbulence or a delay. Then the captain continued, and the words turned the air inside the plane into ice. We have been targeted by hostile aircraft. A beat. This is not a drill. Another beat, smaller now, because even he couldn't believe what he was saying. We are showing missile lock, and we may have less than 90 seconds. For a moment, the cabin didn't react the way you'd expect, because human brains don't accept impossible danger instantly. Silence first. The kind of silence where everyone is waiting for the joke, waiting for the correction, waiting for someone to say, sorry folks, wrong announcement. But then you heard a sharp gasp from somewhere up front. Then one scream. Then another. And suddenly the whole plane erupted like a dam breaking. A woman shouted, no no no, over and over, like repetition could cancel reality. A child started crying so hard he hiccuped, and his mother pulled him into her chest with both arms like she could physically hide him from the sky. Phones appeared everywhere, shaky hands dialing numbers, messages flying across screens, people trying to grab one last piece of home before it disappeared. In 11C, the businessman's laptop slipped off his tray and hit the floor with a harsh crack. He didn't even flinch, he didn't even look down. He was already holding his phone to his ear, whispering into the dead ring tone like it was a prayer. Pick up, please pick up. In 11E, the elderly woman pressed her jade pendant to her lips, eyes wet, speaking quiet words in a language most of the cabin didn't understand, but everyone understood the meaning. Please. Not like this. Flight attendants froze in the aisle, trained for panic attacks and turbulence and angry passengers, not for an airliner being hunted. One of them tried to force a smile and raise his hands. "Everyone please stay seated," he said, but his voice shook so badly it betrayed him. Because how do you tell people to stay calm when the captain just said, "Missile"? The intercom crackled again, and Captain Cole's voice came back, even more desperate now. "If there is anyone on board with combat flight training, military pilot experience, anything like that, please identify yourself immediately, and come to the cockpit." That's when the fear turned into something darker. Hopelessness. Because people looked around and realized what that question really meant. The captain didn't have a plan. The captain was begging. A man near the front shouted, "We're going to die," and that sentence spread like poison. Someone started praying loudly, someone else sobbed into a jacket, someone slammed their fist into the armrest, rage and terror mixing into one ugly sound. And in the middle of all of it, seat 11D finally changed. Maya had been so still that people forgot she was there. But now her eyes opened, sharp and awake, like the announcement wasn't shocking, just familiar. Her face didn't twist into panic. She didn't scream. She didn't reach for a phone. She just sat up, calm as if she'd heard an alarm like that 100 times. Then her hands moved, fast and precise, earbuds out, hoodie off, hair tightened back, like she was putting on an invisible uniform. The businessman beside her was shaking, whispering into his phone, and didn't even notice the kid next to him had turned into something else. The older woman across the aisle looked over and paused mid-prayer, because she saw Maya's expression and felt a chill she couldn't explain. Maya stood up in the aisle, small enough that she barely reached the shoulder of the nearest adult. But when she lifted her chin, her eyes didn't look 12 anymore. They looked like a pilot's eyes. And she spoke one sentence that cut through the chaos like a blade. "I need to get to the cockpit, right now." The flight attendant she stopped was a young guy with wide eyes and a badge that read Jordan, and he looked like he was seconds away from becoming a passenger himself. He tried to pull his arm back, shaking his head fast. "Sweetheart, you need to sit down right now, everyone has to stay seated." But Maya didn't move. She tightened her grip just enough to make him freeze, not painful, just firm, like a hand that had learned control instead of panic. "Jordan," she said, reading his name like she'd known him for years, "listen to me, the captain asked for a combat pilot, that's me." He blinked, almost offended by the idea. "No, you're a kid." Maya's voice stayed calm, low, and strangely sharp. "Call sign Falcon, Project Skyforge, authorization phrase, Tango Echo 7, Niner, Lima." The words meant nothing to the passengers, but they hit Jordan's face like a slap, because training manuals always have things you're told you'll never hear, and this sounded exactly like one of them. He swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we have less than a minute before missiles turn this plane into ash," Maya said, "and I can keep that from happening, but only if you get me to the cockpit right now." Jordan stared at her eyes, and something in them made his doubt feel childish. Not because she looked older, she didn't. Because she looked certain. The cabin around them was breaking apart emotionally, people crying, shouting, clinging to each other. Someone yelled, "Why is that little girl standing?" Another voice snapped, "Sit her down." Maya didn't even glance at them, her focus was locked forward, like the cockpit door was the only real thing left in the world. Jordan finally nodded, like his body decided before his brain could argue. Okay, come with me." They pushed up the aisle, and it felt like walking through a storm made of human fear. Hands reached out, grabbing Jordan's sleeve. "What's happening?" A man shouted, "Are we going to die?" A woman sobbed, "Please do something." Jordan kept moving, and Maya moved like a shadow behind him, small, fast, steady. Passengers stared at her as she passed, confused, almost angry, because in their minds there was no version of reality where a child belonged near the cockpit during a missile emergency. One man pointed and shouted, "That's the pilot," like it was a joke, like laughter could protect him. But nobody laughed. They reached the cockpit door, and Jordan pounded on it with his fist, hard enough to sting. "Captain, open up, I have someone." The door clicked, slid open, and Captain Cole appeared with his face tight and pale, like the last minute had aged him 5 years. His eyes rushed past Jordan and landed on Maya. And the hope on his face collapsed into disbelief so fast it almost looked like anger. "No," he said instantly, "no, I asked for a pilot, I asked for military, I asked for someone who can." Maya stepped forward before he could finish, her voice cutting clean through his panic. "Captain Ethan Cole," she said, and his eyes widened because she said his name like she'd studied it. "I'm Lieutenant Maya Torres, call sign Falcon, Project Skyforge. I have logged combat hours and live operations, you can verify me right now." Cole shook his head. "You're 12. "I am," Maya said, "and you're out of time." Behind him, First Officer Lena's voice cracked as she stared at a flashing indicator. "Captain, we have launch warnings, we have maybe 50 seconds. Cole's mouth opened like he wanted to argue with the universe itself. And then the radio crackled with a new voice, not civilian, not air traffic, something sharper, controlled, military. "Pacific Air 417, this is Eagle Lead, 2 fighters scrambling, ETA 12 minutes. Cole grabbed the mic like it was a lifeline. "Eagle Lead, we're locked, we can't evade like combat, do you have guidance? We have a person here claiming." Maya leaned in and spoke into the radio with calm authority that made the cockpit feel smaller. "Eagle Lead, this is Falcon." There was a half-second of silence. Then the voice came back, louder, shocked, suddenly very real. "Falcon." Lena's eyes snapped to Maya like she'd been struck. Eagle Lead continued, "If Falcon is on that aircraft, put her on controls immediately, do you understand me, Captain, immediately." Cole turned back to Maya, and for the first time his disbelief broke, not because it made sense, but because the only thing worse than trusting a child was doing nothing and watching everyone die. The timer shrieked again, and Lena's voice went thin. 40 seconds. Maya held his gaze, steady and unblinking. "Captain," she said, "I don't need you to believe in me, I need you to give me the seat." Cole's hands trembled on the yoke, the whole cockpit filled with the sound of alarms and fast breathing. And then he made the impossible decision. He stepped aside and said the words that would either save 200 lives or end his career forever. "Get in the right seat," he told her, "tell us what to do." Maya slid into the right seat like she belonged there, not like a kid sneaking into a place she shouldn't be. The chair was huge, the controls were built for adult hands, and her feet barely reached the pedals, but her fingers found the right places instantly, like muscle memory had been waiting under her skin. Captain Cole stared at her for half a second too long, still fighting his own disbelief. Maya didn't look back at him, she looked at the screens, the warning tones, the numbers dropping like a guillotine. 35 seconds, Lena called out, her voice trembling. Maya's voice stayed calm. "Okay, everyone listen, I need clean callouts, no guessing, no panic." She pointed without looking. "Captain, you handle throttle when I say, Lena, watch the threat display and tell me launch and bearing, fast and clear." Cole swallowed hard. "Understood." The aircraft shuddered as Maya disengaged the gentle, comfortable flight profile and began flying it like it was something else entirely. Outside, the drones were closing, 3 silent hunters in empty sky. Inside, the missile lock tone rose in pitch, sharp and angry, like a scream getting closer. "Launch," Lena shouted, 2 missiles, coming in fast, 6 o'clock low. Maya didn't flinch. "Copy." She grabbed the yoke and banked left hard, not the smooth turn passengers barely feel, but an aggressive roll that made the cockpit creak. Down in the cabin, people screamed as the floor tilted like the world had suddenly decided gravity was optional. Maya's eyes flicked across the instruments: airspeed, altitude, attitude, rate of turn, engine temps. Her brain did what it had been trained to do, turn terror into math. "Captain, throttle change on my mark," she said. Cole's hands hovered. "This isn't standard." "Mark," Maya snapped. 2 and 3 to idle. Cole obeyed, pushing 2 engines down while keeping the others hot. The huge jet lurched as uneven power tried to twist it sideways. Lena gasped, "We're going to spin." Maya corrected instantly, rudder pressure, aileron input, tiny fast moves that kept the plane controlled while the missiles struggled to predict what kind of aircraft would do something this wrong. In the cabin, luggage slid, people grabbed armrests, a flight attendant hit a seatback trying to stay upright. Maya rolled the aircraft farther, forcing a steep angle, then leveled it for a heartbeat. "Missiles adjusting," Lena said, "they're still tracking." "Good," Maya answered, like tracking was expected, like this was just step one. She shoved the nose down, a hard dive, stealing altitude to steal time. The altimeter spun faster than any passenger would ever want to see. A commercial jet wasn't supposed to fall like that, but Maya used the weight of the aircraft like a weapon. 10 seconds to intercept, Lena cried. "Captain, full power, all engines, now," Maya said. Cole pushed the throttles forward, and the jet roared. Maya waited, eyes locked on timing, then pulled up hard, not slowly, not gently, but with force that pressed both pilots into their seats. The nose climbed steep, the whole aircraft groaned. Passengers in the cabin felt their stomachs drop, then lift, then drop again. Some people prayed louder, some went silent, some passed out. And then, outside the cockpit window, the sky flashed. 2 explosions bloomed behind them like angry suns, close enough that the plane rattled from the shockwave. "Missed," Lena shouted, half laughing, half sobbing, "they missed." Maya didn't celebrate, she was already moving. "Not done," she said, "they'll shoot again." On the display, the drones regrouped, shifting positions like they were learning her tricks in real time. Maya kept the aircraft from becoming predictable. A sharp turn, then a climb, then a leveling move that looked normal just long enough to bait the drones into committing. Then another sudden roll that made the targeting solutions collapse. "Another lock," Lena called, "they're trying again." Maya nodded, "Let them." The cabin was chaos now, but the cockpit was pure focus. Cole stared at this child's hands on the controls, how steady they were, how sure. It didn't look like luck. It looked like repetition, like someone who had practiced the worst day of your life until it became routine. "Falcon," the military voice came through the radio again, "you're doing great, fighters are inbound, hold on." Maya answered without looking away from the threat display, "I will." Then she leaned forward, eyes narrowing, voice dropping like ice. "Because I'm not letting this plane fall out of the sky." The drones didn't back off after the first miss, they got smarter. They stopped rushing in like amateurs, and started circling like they had all the time in the world. Maya watched their movement on the screen and felt her stomach tighten, not from fear, but from respect. Because this wasn't random. This was deliberate. "Captain," Lena said, voice tight, "they're spreading out, they're trying to trap us." Maya nodded once, "Yeah," she said, "they want us predictable." The missile lock tone returned, louder now, sharper, like an alarm that had learned how to threaten. "Lock," Lena called, "new angle, coming from low right." Maya's eyes flicked to the numbers, then to the timing, then back to the threat line. "Do we have another launch?" she asked. Lena swallowed, "Not yet." Maya leaned forward, jaw set, "They're waiting." That was the terrifying part. Because when something waits, it's thinking. Then the display changed, and Lena's voice jumped, "Launch, single missile, close, very close." Captain Cole's face went gray, "How close?" Lena's hands shook as she read it out, "Under 30 seconds. This one wasn't like the others. It wasn't fired from far away with time to dance. It was fired from the worst possible spot, a tight angle, quick strike, like the drone had studied her moves and decided to cut the rope. Maya's calm didn't break, but her voice went sharper. "Okay," she said, "this is the hard one." Cole swallowed, "What do you need?" Maya didn't look at him, "I need you to trust me even if it feels wrong." In the cabin, people were already screaming again as the plane twitched into another turn. Somebody yelled, "Not again," like their lungs couldn't handle another wave of fear. Maya stared at the threat line and made a decision that would sound insane to anyone who hadn't lived in combat simulators. "Captain, full power, all engines, keep them there, do not pull back," she ordered. Cole hesitated for one heartbeat, then shoved the throttles forward, the engines roaring like the aircraft was suddenly angry. Lena's eyes widened. "We're going to overspeed." Maya answered, "We're going to survive." The missile timer dropped, 20 seconds, 19. Maya grabbed the yoke and rolled the aircraft hard, farther than before. Not just a steep bank. Inverted. The world flipped upside down, the horizon spun, and a passenger jet became something it was never meant to be. In the cabin, the screams changed pitch, because fear has levels and they had just reached the one that sounds like pure disbelief. People slammed into seatbelts, loose bags flew, someone cried out a name like they were calling it into the sky. Captain Cole shouted, "We're inverted," like he couldn't stop himself from saying it out loud. Maya's voice stayed steady. "I know," she said, "hold throttles." The missile was still coming, still screaming up from below, still locked on. Lena called out fast, 10 seconds. Maya's eyes narrowed, and she pulled the yoke in the inverted position. Which meant the aircraft dropped. It dove while upside down, using gravity and speed like a blade. The jet screamed through the air, and for a moment it felt like the whole aircraft was falling out of the sky. 9 seconds, 8. Maya rolled again, just enough to shift the missile's tracking math. Then she snapped the plane back toward level, not fully, just a controlled whip that made the targeting system lose its clean line. Lena's voice broke, "It's right behind us." Maya whispered, "Good." 5 seconds. Maya jerked the nose, a sharp, brutal adjustment, not a smooth airline move, a survival move. The cockpit shook, the controls fought back, the airframe groaned like it was begging her to stop. Maya didn't stop. The missile streaked past so close the warning tone spiked. And then the sky behind them flashed, not because it hit them, but because it detonated in empty air. A bloom of fire, a violent shockwave, and the aircraft rattled like it had been punched by a giant hand. Lena screamed, half sob, half laugh, "It missed, it missed." Captain Cole stared at Maya like he was seeing a ghost. "How did you even think of that?" Maya exhaled once, "Fast, controlled, training," she said, "and luck that we had enough speed." But there was no time to breathe, because the drones were still there. And now they were angry. "Falcon," the radio crackled, "Eagle lead, we have visual, we are entering the fight." Maya's shoulders lowered just a fraction, like someone finally arrived to help carry the weight. Outside, 2 fighter jets tore into view like silver knives, fast, loud, certain. The drones shifted instantly, trying to escape, trying to reposition, trying to run. They didn't get far. Fox 2, Eagle lead called, and a missile from the fighter snapped forward like lightning. One drone exploded into fragments, a quick bright flash against the dark sky. "Splash 1, came the voice, clean and satisfied. A second fighter locked onto another drone, second target acquired. Another streak, another flash, another fireball. Splash 2. The third drone tried to dive away, desperate, twisting like an insect caught in water. But the fighter pilot stayed on it, calm and ruthless. "Guns," Eagle lead said, and the cockpit speakers filled with a rapid tearing sound, like the sky itself was being shredded. The last drone broke apart in a spray of metal and smoke. Splash 3, Eagle lead confirmed, all hostiles destroyed, Pacific Air 417, you are clear. For 2 seconds, the cockpit went silent except for breathing. No alarms, no lock tone, no screaming warning. Just the hum of engines and the fact that they were still flying. Maya kept her hands on the controls, eyes scanning, not relaxing yet, because survival doesn't let go instantly. Then she finally spoke, quiet and sure. "Captain," she said, "the plane is yours again, threats are down." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Captain Cole realized something that hit him harder than any alarm. They were alive. Every passenger, every child, every person who had been seconds from disappearing. Alive. Because a sleeping kid in seat 11D wasn't just a kid. She was the reason the story didn't end in fire. Do you want me to write segment 9, the aftermath and landing and the secrecy starting to break? The moment the last drone disappeared from the radar, Captain Cole's hands went back to the controls, but his fingers were still shaking like they belonged to someone else. The cockpit felt too quiet now, like the world had gone mute after screaming for so long. Lena wiped her face with the back of her sleeve, eyes swollen, voice raw. I can't believe we're still here. Maya stayed seated for one extra breath, scanning the instruments the way predators scan a horizon, not relaxing, not celebrating, just making sure the sky wasn't lying. Then she unbuckled slowly, and in that motion you could see the switch inside her flip back, just a little. Not fully into kid, not fully into pilot. Somewhere in between. Captain, she said softly, you need a normal approach into Los Angeles, keep it clean, no more extreme moves, the airframe has been through enough. Captain Cole nodded fast, swallowing hard, yes, yes. Lena leaned closer, voice shaking, who are you? Maya looked at her, and for a split second she looked 12 again, tired eyes, small face, a child carrying a weight that didn't fit. I'm just someone who didn't want people to die today, she said. And then she stepped out of the cockpit, back into the aisle where hundreds of passengers were still crying, hugging, shaking, trying to understand what alive even meant now. The plane was still flying steady, but the cabin felt like it had just survived an earthquake. People were strapped in like survivors on a lifeboat, some whispering prayers, some silent, some laughing in that broken way humans laugh when fear finally releases its grip. When Maya walked down the aisle, faces turned toward her like sunflowers to light. Word had spread fast, the way news spreads when everyone is desperate for a reason. That's her, someone whispered. That's the kid, another voice said, like, kid didn't even make sense anymore. A man reached out and touched her sleeve like he needed proof she was real. An older woman clasped her hands together and bowed her head as Maya passed, tears streaming. Maya tried to nod politely, tried to look normal, but her legs felt heavy now, like the adrenaline had been holding her upright and it just left. She reached seat 11D and sat down, pulled the hoodie back over her head, and for the first time since the alarms began, her eyes stung. Not from fear. From the crash afterward, from the exhaustion, from the quiet thought that she was still a kid and she had just carried an entire aircraft full of strangers on her shoulders. When the plane finally began its descent, the city lights of Los Angeles glittered below like nothing had happened. That was the strangest part. The world looked normal, while inside this aircraft everyone had lived through the kind of horror that should change the sky forever. The landing itself was smooth, Captain Cole was too skilled to mess that up, and maybe he needed that normal landing more than anyone on board. But the moment the wheels touched down, everyone knew this was not a normal arrival. Because the runway was lined with emergency vehicles. Fire trucks, ambulances, police cars, lights flashing red and blue across the tarmac like a warning to the whole city. And mixed among them were vehicles that didn't belong in any passenger terminal. Dark SUVs with government plates, unmarked vans, people in plain suits standing too still, watching too carefully. Maya saw them through the window and her stomach tightened. Because she knew what those cars meant. It meant the secret wasn't safe anymore. It meant too many people had heard too much, seen too much. It meant the world was about to find out that seat 11D wasn't just a seat, it was a classified problem. When the seatbelt sign turned off, passengers stood up like they were waking from a nightmare. Some hugged strangers, some cried openly, some just stared ahead like their brains hadn't caught up to the fact that they were alive. Maya stayed seated, hood up, small, trying to disappear back into the ordinary role she was built to play. But she didn't get the chance. Two men in dark suits appeared at her row, calm faces, quiet voices, the kind of calm that comes from authority, not comfort. One of them leaned down slightly, Lieutenant Torres, he said, not asking, stating. People nearby froze, because the word lieutenant didn't belong to a kid, and hearing it out loud made everything feel even more unreal. Maya nodded once. "Please come with us," the second man said. A passenger shouted from behind, "Wait, we need to thank her." Another voice yelled, "What's her real name?" The suits didn't answer, they just guided Maya forward, moving fast, controlling space, controlling sightlines, making sure cameras didn't get a clean look at her face. They took her through a cleared jetway, away from the crowd, away from the noise, into a quiet room that felt colder than the cabin ever had. Inside were more people waiting. Not airline staff, not police. Military uniforms, badges, a lawyer with a thick folder, and a woman with a colonel's insignia who looked tired in the way leaders look tired after history happens on their watch. The colonel stepped forward, eyes steady, voice not unkind. "Falcon," she said, and the call sign landed in the room like a locked door opening. Maya stood at attention without thinking, automatic, trained. "You did good," the colonel said, "you saved everyone on that plane." Maya's throat tightened, and she forced the words out calmly, "Yes, ma'am." The colonel's expression hardened slightly, "But now we have a bigger problem." Maya didn't speak, she already knew. The colonel gestured to a screen where news alerts were already exploding, messages, headlines, social posts, blurry photos, panic and praise mixing into one loud storm. "The attack is going public," the colonel said, "and your involvement is going to leak. We can't fully contain it, too many witnesses, too many radio channels, too many recordings." Maya's hands clenched inside her sleeves, "So what happens?" The colonel exhaled, "The program will be partially exposed, controlled disclosure, limited details, heavy protection." "People will be angry," Maya said quietly. "They will," the colonel replied, "some will call you a hero, some will call this abuse, some will call it impossible, and everyone will have an opinion." Maya's eyes dropped for a moment, then lifted again, "My parents." The colonel nodded, softer now, "They're being brought in, you'll see them soon, right now you're staying in protective custody." Outside, the airport kept moving like normal people were just catching flights and buying coffee. But inside that room, the world was shifting. Because by morning the story would be everywhere. Passengers would talk, someone would post, interviews would spill out, and the idea of a 12-year-old combat pilot would crash into the public like a wave. And on every screen, people would fight about the same question. Is this a miracle, or is this a crime? Maya sat in a chair too big for her, feet not touching the floor, hoodie still on, and listened to grown adults argue about her life like she was a headline instead of a human. And for the first time that day, her calm finally cracked just a little. Not in panic. In loneliness. Because saving everyone was the easy part. Now she had to survive being seen. "Do you want me to write segment 10 next, the emotional ending with gratitude, the public fallout, and the final powerful message?" The first time Maya saw her parents again, it wasn't in their apartment, it wasn't at a school event, it wasn't even in the warm safety of home. It was in a secure room with guards at the door, cameras banned, paperwork stacked on tables, and adults speaking in clipped voices like emotions were a security risk. Her mother ran to her so fast the soldiers didn't even try to stop her. She grabbed Maya's face with both hands, kissed her forehead, and then just held her like she was trying to make sure her daughter was still real. Her father hugged her too, tighter than usual, the kind of hug that says, "I'm proud of you and terrified for you" at the same time. Maya didn't say much, because the words inside her felt too big. She just leaned into them, finally letting herself be small for a moment. But outside that room, the world was already on fire. By sunrise, the headlines were everywhere. First they reported the attack, drones over American soil, a passenger jet targeted, national shock. Then the story twisted into something nobody could ignore. Hero pilot aboard saves plane. And then, like secrets always do when too many people survive, details began to leak. A passenger posted online, "I sat next to her, she was a kid, she flew the plane." A flight attendant confirmed something vague on a morning show, eyes still red. Air traffic recordings spread in clips, edited, reposted, turned into 1,000 theories. And when the call sign slipped out, Falcon, it didn't stay contained. People who watched military news connected dots, strangers started digging, and suddenly the world wasn't asking, what happened? They were asking, how can a child be trained for combat? The debates hit like a storm. Some called Maya a miracle, a symbol of talent and discipline, proof that heroes don't always look like heroes. Others called it monstrous, child exploitation, a government stealing childhood and dressing it up as patriotism. News anchors argued, psychologists argued, politicians argued, strangers argued under every comment section like the internet could deliver a verdict. And Maya sat in protective custody watching it all on muted screens. Because the loudest people in the world were fighting about her life, and none of them had ever looked into the sky with a missile coming for them. A week later, the military arranged something private, something human. A quiet meeting with a small group of passengers from that flight, no cheering crowd, no flashing cameras, just survivors, and the kid they couldn't forget. The businessman from 11C walked in first, eyes swollen, shoulders heavy. He stopped in front of Maya and his voice broke instantly. "I didn't even look at you," he whispered, "I thought you were just a tired kid." He swallowed hard and pressed a hand to his chest like he couldn't breathe. "My daughters hugged me this morning because you kept me alive long enough to go home." He stepped forward and hugged her carefully, like she was both steel and glass. Across the room, the elderly woman from 11E reached Maya next, holding her hands with the gentleness of someone holding a bird. She whispered a blessing, then said in plain English, "You were small, but you were not weak." Maya's throat tightened, and she nodded because if she spoke too much she might fall apart. Then a mother came in with her young son, the boy who had screamed during the first dive. He stared at Maya with the kind of wide-eyed seriousness only children have. "You're the one who saved us," he said. Maya crouched so they were eye level, the way she'd been trained to talk to adults who were scared, but she did it for a child instead. "I did my best," she said. "And it worked," the boy said simply, like it was the most important fact in the universe. He hesitated, then asked the question that hit Maya harder than any missile alarm. "Do you ever wish you were normal?" Maya blinked, and for a second she couldn't hide the truth on her face. She thought about birthday parties she missed, friends she couldn't keep, sleepovers she never got to have. She thought about the way the world looked at her now, like she was either a superhero or a scandal, never just a kid. And then she remembered the cabin, the screams, the prayers, the phones shaking in hands that believed they were about to die. She remembered how quiet it got after the last drone fell. How life returned in a single breath. Maya spoke softly, honest. "Sometimes I wonder what normal would feel like," she said, "but if I was normal, you wouldn't be standing here." The boy nodded like he understood far more than he should, then reached out and held her hand for a moment. That night, when she was alone again, Maya cried quietly into her hoodie. Not because she regretted saving anyone, but because being a hero felt lonely when you were 12. Months later, the government tried to control the narrative with a formal ceremony, the kind designed to smooth chaos into something the public could digest. A stage, flags, speeches, cameras lined up like a wall. Maya wore a uniform tailored to her small frame, the metal heavy against her chest. She stood straight anyway, because she'd been taught that posture is part of courage. A reporter got a question through at the end, loud enough to cut past the security. "Falcon, what do you say to the people calling you a victim?" Maya paused, and everyone expected a prepared answer, something polished, something safe. Instead, she said the only thing that felt true. "I say they weren't on that plane." The room went silent. Maya looked directly forward, eyes steady, voice simple. "I don't want kids to have to do what I do," she said, "I wish the world didn't need it. But the world needed it that day. And because I trained, people went home." She swallowed once, the smallest crack of emotion, then held it together. "That matters more than what strangers call me." After the ceremony, after the cameras, after the noise, she returned to the place that felt most like home, the training facility, the simulators, the quiet corridors where people spoke in purpose instead of opinions. Her instructor met her at the doorway and handed her the gear like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Welcome back," the instructor said, "you ready to fly?" Maya took the helmet, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled like a kid again. Because out there, in the sky, she wasn't a headline. She was just Falcon. And that's the part most people will never understand. That heroes don't always want applause. Sometimes they just want to do the job, survive the moment, and crawl back into a hoodie afterward like they never existed. And somewhere on that aircraft, in the middle of row 11, there was still an empty seat with a simple number. 11D. Most people will always remember it as the place a child slept. But the people who were on that flight will remember it as the place hope was hiding in plain sight. So the next time you see someone who looks too small, too young, too harmless to matter, remember this story. Because capability doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly, eyes closed, wearing an oversized hoodie. Waiting for the moment the world suddenly needs the impossible.